So, as a woman scientist in the environmental field, what's your toughest challenge?
You know, that's always such a great question and a hard question. And, you know, I've worked with the EPA for more than 15 years. I actually started off researching, working with our Office of Research and Development, working on kind of on-the-ground research, providing the type of information that feeds into our guidelines and the regulatory framework. And I would say, I slowly try to get at that because I realize the decision-making process is really critical. That it's not sufficient to have the science and the data. That's really important to understand the science and data and to apply that in an effective way. I would say probably the toughest thing is oftentimes I'm the only woman and woman of color in the room in a leadership position, where I have to basically try to get us to a place where we reach an environmental solution. And so that has been, it's been a challenge, but I would also say that in doing that, I've had the most amazing experience along the way, where I would begin and think, gosh, how am I gonna get this group of people together and make us get to this point? But it's really led to some innovative ways of thinking about how to try to address the problem. And so it's been rewarding, but really challenging. And I think the thing that really comes to mind in working those type of situations is that at the end of the day, everybody wants the same thing. We all want to have, clean air, clean water, et cetera, and to keep that in mind as we try to move forward. So, and it's been really rewarding. So I love that collaborative give and take that we've been able to try to do as in these type of situations and working with the states and the cities and the local stakeholders. So that's my experience in EPA. And I was curious, since you asked me the question of, what's your experience as the Deputy Associate Administrator for External Affairs in achieving environmental solutions?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think I would say that I am often the only non-scientist and non-lawyer in the room. So I'm always focused on WWPD. What would people do, right? Because we have all this scientific information and all the scientific findings. And then, let me just take a step back for a second. Most of EPA's work over the past 40 years are based on two statutes, the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. So everything that we've done over the past 40 years has been an interpretation of that language that was written 40 years ago. So you have the attorneys who do the wonderful things that attorneys do, and you have the scientists that do the wonderful things that scientists do, and it makes sense over there, but in the middle where the people are, it's sort of like, what will people do? I'll share a very brief story with you. Last year, I was traveling with our assistant administrator for the Office of Research and Development. We had just recently done some studies on a particular water body to determine whether or not the seafood in the water was safe. And we determined that it was, and we were issuing a press release, and then we were going out to have these stakeholder meetings to have the conversation. And so in the press release, we're talking scientifically about what we have found, and one of the things that we said is that we tested the mice and shrimp, and everything was fine. So I sat there with this brilliant man from Harvard who was just talking about all of these wonderful scientific things that we had done, and we were doing different community meetings. We're probably in the 4th meeting, and someone in the audience goes, I have a question. I understand why you tested the shrimp, but I don't understand why you tested the mice. Mice and shrimp. It's not. It's mycid. M-Y-C-I-D. mysid shrimp. But I heard what they heard. I thought it was mice and shrimp too. So I too, but you know, I'm with a scientist from Harvard, right? Even though I'm a proud graduate of the University of Southern California right here in Los Angeles, I thought I'm not about to ask this question about why we tested it on the mice. But we obviously never tested it on the mice. It was mysid shrimp. And so, you know, I'm the little pop-up bubble in the room that goes, what are you talking about? You know, excuse me, I'm smart, I understand, I get it. I just don't get that. So part of our Office of External Affairs and Environmental Education actually works on messaging and how we communicate. And we really do try and think about what would people do? How will people understand this information when we put it forward? Interestingly, because we're a regulatory agency, scientifically there are certain things we have to say. And legally, there are certain things we have to say. And so we're always in the middle trying to find just the right way to communicate some of these very important messages. So once again, people see themselves in our work. It's not just science and legal. It's not just business and industry and enviros. You've got AARP, you've got the Junior League, you have the NAACP, you have the Boys and Girls Club. You have all of these people who really need to understand how these things impact them in their everyday lives so that they can make a decision to take their action for change. So I would say that that's my biggest challenge, is just being that pop-up bubble in the room all the time.
I love your mysid shrimp. It's so true, because I know I've definitely sat in meetings, you know, where it's 50 people and, you know, some scientists or even myself sometimes will talk about something. All of a sudden I notice that kind of deer in headlights look, like, oh, wait a minute, what did I just say? And to try to remember and make sure that we do a better job of communicating the right type of information that people can understand, depending on the audience that, you know, you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis.
Which is what makes expanding the conversation that much more important. Because I can't preach to the Junior League on how to carry EPA's message. I can simply tell them the information, and then they're talking to their constituents in ways that resonate with them on our messages and on our issues of importance. And so that's why it's so important to have other people at the table so that they can glean what they need for amplification with their own entities. What's your coolest experience, Cindy, as a scientist?
Gosh, you know, I've been really lucky as a scientist and working at EPA. I've been able to travel to different places, but I have to say that the coolest thing I've ever done is to work at the US Embassy in Beijing. And I was invited as a scientific advisor. Our embassies across the world have oftentimes an embassy and our foreign service officers, and they don't have a technical expert on the ground normally. And everyone's heard that there's a lot of interesting things taking place in China. We have a relationship with China, and one of the things that I think this administration has been trying to do is to improve our relationships kind of globally, specifically with China. We have so much back and forth with China. And so I was really fortunate to be able to be invited to the embassy and work there and work on just totally cool stuff. I'll give you a couple examples. You know, we talked about bottled water here earlier. Here in the States. And we have our US expats in Beijing. We actually have a couple of 100,000 US expats in Beijing, just that city itself. And then we also have our foreign service and their families and community who live there. And there was a lot of issues that came up about what water should we drink, you know, what's a really important water quality. And this actually fed into a bigger issue, both for, I think, the US government and the Chinese government. So one of the things I was trying to be sent over to work with is to work with the Chinese on increasing our knowledge and sharing of knowledge. But I got to do a tap versus bottled water testing in the city, working with the city municipality, and we tested bottled waters, all the different kinds of bottled waters. And we also tested city water. We tested the embassy water that's treated on site. And we just found fascinating information. And it was really great to get the information out there, both to our U.S. community who work and live in China, to our U.S. officers who work there, but to get that information that basically, once again, be careful of the bottled water that you're drinking because that's not regulated. The other thing that I got to really work on that was super, super interesting was to try to see if we can work with China on finding this relation between environmental health and public health. So for example, one of the things that's taking place in China is there's a lot of cancer villages incidences. There's groundwater contamination. And so I got to work with the Chinese government, and we actually have, US EPA has a memorandum of understanding with the Chinese and their equivalent of EPA, where we're trying to share knowledge, work on mercury issues, work on water quality issues. And so in trying to not only work domestically on the issues that we have, but making sure, because we live in such a global environment, that that message is sent and shared with other countries. So it was an amazing experience. I met really cool people and from all walks of life. And what was really cool is not only did I get to use my scientific background, but also the policy background, the regulatory background. So it was,
That's good. That's
it was
great.
really, really fun. So I'm always searching for that one thing that we can do and have that has an immediate impact on improving people's understanding. We talked a lot about communication, and I think particularly as a scientist, I've now recognized that sometimes our message isn't getting across. And I always think about, what's a good way to have a message that sends an immediate, understanding or immediate impact of our environmental issues on their daily lives, that has a direct impact on an individual's daily life. So I wanted to ask you, Stephanie, what do you think would make a difference? What kind of an impact would make a difference on that, your average person in their daily life?
I live and breathe the concept of getting people to understand where they fit in this conversation. So I think, that one sort of 60-second thing where people go, oh, really? That's amazing. I think media can do that sometimes very well, with a very great impact, and sometimes very well with a not so great impact. But I think some sort of PSA or commercial where there's, maybe there's a woman and you can tell that she's carrying a child, and so maybe she's drinking a bottle of water, and she drops the bottle of water. And then, you do the whole time lapse thing, and then you show her giving birth, and then you show the child growing old, and then the child giving birth, and on and on and on, till you have all these generations of people, and they're all sort of like, the bottle's still there kind of thing. Like, getting people to connect with, once you put that bottle down, it's not going anywhere in your lifetime, and your children's lifetime, and anyone else's lifetime. Just, recycle now, because it's good, is not a message that, resonates. So there needs to be like this sort of really powerful thing. Or talking lipstick. Can you imagine, ladies, if your purse opened up right now and some of that lipstick and lotion and eyeliner and some of the other wonderful things that we have start talking to you about what they were actually made of and what those things, some of those chemicals can actually do to your bodies? What kind of commercial would that make? If, a purse or a bag, doesn't have to be gender specific, but this bag opens up and this toiletry pops out and says, guess what? Guess what I did to you today? And you know, so I just think it's got to be something that just sort of grabs you for you. This is not about making you feel guilty about, you know, the melting ice caps or saving the polar bears or any of that. But if you know, if you like to surf, if you like to fish, if you just like to breathe, you want to know what you can do to help make a difference. The environment is not a problem. The environment's a wonderful, cool thing, which is why we're all here. So, you know, protecting it isn't about fixing a problem. It's about this opportunity for everyone to have a chance to make a contribution for themselves and for the generations that that come behind us.
I love that. The image that you basically just sent me, I can already see it in my head. I'm hoping someone out there heard that. Can actually
in the audience,
produce
maybe
that little clip for us or something, because I think that that's the kind of thing I always think about. Is I know, like, particularly working in my field, we get lost in, you know, the regulations or the science, and I often think, like, you know, what is it that people can do? And I love that. If we could do some kind of a image like that, would be really helpful.
Well, I believe that we are out of time, but I really want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your time this morning. And thank you all for being here and the work that you do to make your contribution to protecting the environment. Thanks so much.
Thank you.